You don't need a title to lead. Just ask Brad Englert. After decades in the trenches, leading massive tech transformations at Accenture and UT Austin, Brad's new mission is teaching you how to lead without power plays. His secret? Spheres of influence. And today, he's going to share the blueprint with us. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for inviting me.
Appreciate you being here. So, you've worked with Fortune 500 companies, major universities. What's a common leadership challenge that you see across both?
Well, I think a lot of organizations, and this is a dirty little secret, don't have a strategy. And I find that, uh, when I got to the university, they had asked me to help them with their first IT strategy. And it really helped guide the organization for the 8 years I was there. So I would say, make sure you have a strategy. If not, get some help to make one.
Excellent, excellent. So, how do you define influence in a workplace where hierarchy is still dominant?
Well, to me, it's about finding uh, mutually beneficial business relationships and those that are closest to you. They're kind of obvious, your boss, your direct reports, executive leaders, and all your staff, because you're probably interacting with your boss and direct reports every week in your one-on-ones. And then you have external sphere of influence, customers, peers and influencers, and strategic vendor partners who, my strategic vendor partners I meet with quarterly and just make sure everything, both sides were working well together. Um, Customers probably once a month, depending on how closely I'm working with them. So you have different cadences for different relationships in terms of getting together.
So, could you maybe share a moment in your career where you had to lead without formal authority and how you handled it?
Well, I was at the a university, Research One University, and the leader of the transformation project had never done it before. And I talked to their executive leadership and I said, in fairness, you asked this person to do something they've never done before. And it was basically an ERP implementation. I said, I've implemented 15 payroll systems. I know how to do this stuff. But, so they actually put me in a client role. So I was the client lead of the transformation project. And the person that they asked to lead actually worked with me on the team, and we were successful together. But sometimes you need to assert yourself, especially when executive leaders aren't behaving correctly.
Yeah, leading without authority is hard. I mean, I worked in a company where there were 8 directors and everybody had their own little area of influence. And
Hmm.
as the tech director, a lot of times things I was asked to do brought in like 3 or 4 of those leaders, but
Right.
yet I had no authority to tell them what to do, when to do it,
That's
how to
right.
do it. And so you have to figure out how to get around all that. So that's always a fun challenge. So what
So,
made you
so,
go ahead?
so
I'm sorry.
those are your peers and influencers. So, it is hard to do that. But one thing I tried to do when I got to the university is I was strategic and with intent met with my peers across the university because take, for example, the VP for public safety. It wasn't a question of if there would be an incident, but when there would be an incident, and how do our teams work together when there's an incident. And we had a bomb scare, we had a shooting, we had a murder, we had 100,000 people in the stadium every other Saturday and the fall. Both our teams worked very well together to make sure people were safe. If I didn't get out and meet with him and understand what his goals were, and I wanted him to know I supported him because public safety is number one. We were able to build a very strong working relationship. Had I stayed in my office and hid behind my screen, not as effective.
Yeah, yeah. So what inspired you to write Spheres of Influence after a 40-year tech career?
I had a lot of stories, and I shared those with my staff over the years. And they actually, some of the stories are kind of funny. They called them Bradisms. And when I retired from the university, I thought, I'm still mentoring two or three people, but that doesn't scale. And I'd like to help a lot more people, especially early in their career. So that's where I got the idea of a book. And I met with my publisher, and the editor was really good. She said, just inventory all your stories. We'll get onto a whiteboard and we'll find a structure. And sure enough, I had boss stories, I had direct report stories, customers, peers and influencers, and they just fell into these buckets. And the other thing she says, you're not writing one page till you have the full outline. That spoke to me. You don't build a house without a blueprint. You don't write a program without a design. So it was really nice to have that full outline. And then it was just fun to recount the stories. I did change the names to protect the guilty and innocent parties, and no companies have been named.
It's interesting. That's good advice that she gave you because I actually had worked with a coach about a year ago on just content. And one of the pieces of advice that he gave me was, tell stories in your content. And I said, well, it would take me a long time to think of some of these stories. And he said, well, when you have spare time, think of your past stories and
Sure.
put them into a document somewhere. And then
Hmm.
as you experience things, like if a client says something and just makes you laugh or it causes some issue that you can solve, put it in there, start keeping
Hmm.
track of it. And so what was a really, really small little database at first has grown to be this huge thing because
Yeah.
I also do things like if I'm reading an article and I see something that somebody says, sometimes I'll even pull like a quote from a politician and then I can
Mm.
critique it because of course I speak on leadership. So
Right.
um I can show like don't do it this way. This isn't good leadership. But it's actually a great habit to get into because then later when you want to write another book, you're gonna have many, many more stories that you can tell as long as you
Right.
made the point of removing the ones you already used. And it's great. And sometimes just having that database, I'll think to myself when I'm writing something, and didn't this happen to me once before? And then you'll search through it and you find it. So
Sure.
yeah.
Well, the other help I had was I wrote a blog once a week for 8 years at the university. Now, why did I do that? Well, one, I wanted to communicate to my staff, 330 people in central IT. Plus, I wanted to communicate to my peers and influencers. And so my blog went out to 330 people on my staff and about 300 other people interested in IT at UT. And I wanted to have transparency. I wanted to give kudos to the staff when necessary. I wanted to apologize when we screwed up, and it was a two-way vehicle. So I had someone, one of my staff said, "Hey, it was nice that you mentioned the career awards, but it takes 6 months to get their pin." It's like, well, I didn't know that. We're a huge bureaucracy. We'll fix that. But just having that dialogue was really, really helpful. And so I had a lot of that content to pull from.
That's the kind of a database of like commentary or stories or even just quotes is
Hmm.
huge. I mean, we years ago we started probably 10 years ago now we started a podcast network and we started archiving, taking snippets of content and creating smaller pieces to reshare. And I had the idea back then to have a database about it, and I was very, 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 very strict about you got to get the stuff into the database. And to this day, we use that database to find
Mm,
old things that were said and put them out again. Or maybe we're doing a
sure.
podcast episode about something that we've done before, and we want to
Hmm.
talk about something we said in there. It's just so much easier to find things. So like What's the first step that someone could take though if they want to grow their influence, but they don't have a big title?
Well, you need to be strategic and you need to be intentional. So you don't have to have authentic business relationships with everybody. Your boss is obvious. Your direct reports is self-evident. All your staff takes more work, different communication channels and techniques. But when you identify your best customers, not all your customers, your best customers, and your most strategic vendor partners, then before you meet with them, you uh, you have an agenda. You know, what are the things you want to share? And then you send it to them beforehand. What do they want to ask you? And that becomes just a regular cadence every month. Once I'm talking with them, I ask, there are three principles that apply to all business relationships. One is understand their goals and aspirations, whether it be your boss or your direct reports or your customer. What are they trying to achieve? Second, set and manage expectations. I was really bad at that early in my career. I got a lot better later in my career. And third, genuinely care about their success. So when I got to the university, I met with this professor who is 40-year on the faculty, electrical engineer, crusty, kind of a crusty old guy. And I had worked with him on a statewide network design a few years earlier, successful design. And I said, give me some advice. He goes, get out of the office and tell people you give a damn. And that was the best advice because I didn't hide in the ivory tower. I didn't make people come to me and supplicate. I would go out and meet them in their offices, whether it's my direct reports or the peers. I was able to cross campus, bump into customers, just get the energy of the campus. And my direct reports saw me coming to their team leader every week, just like clockwork, and showing the flag, you know, and understanding, you know, what do their team leads, what are they trying to achieve, and how can I help them get there?
Could you give us a breakdown of how your spheres of influence model actually works in real situations?
Well, it's let's take one of the principles, set and manage expectations. So I had a boss who was this type A personality boss. Everything was urgent, urgent. And I was trying to leave one day, have dinner with my wife, and I get this call, 5 o'clock. It's the boss. I need a white paper, a white paper. And I literally said, whoa. I didn't say no because that set her off. I said, whoa, when do you need this white paper? Oh, let me check my calendar. Oh, in 2 weeks. I meet with the client in 2 weeks. Okay. How many pages do you want this white paper to be? Oh, 3 pages. I was thinking 10. Do you have an example of a white paper that I could use? Yeah, ask David. I did one in XYZ Corp 10 years ago. Well, guess what? I went home and had dinner with my wife. Now, before I learned to say whoa, I would have called my wife and canceled dinner. I would have stayed up all night doing research and the next day delivered a 10-page paper and get yelled at. So just saying whoa gives some mental time and energy to really understand what's being asked.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I mean, I actually I learned that over the course of my career as well, that like you have to it's actually a guiding principle in my coaching program. You have to let work stay at work. And
Mm,
and I always tell my clients, there's a reason you have a staff and that they each have defined roles.
yeah.
And like there's somebody who's looked at as like the number two in command when you're not there.
Hmm.
It's so that you don't have to be there all the time.
That's right.
That's the reason, you know. And so kudos to you, you know, for going home, having dinner with your wife and not canceling. Because like you said, it would have ended badly on all sides, right? Personally, your
That's
wife would
right.
have been upset that you didn't come home for dinner.
I
And
would
then
have been frustrated.
and you'd have been frustrated. And then professionally, you know, the boss would have been frustrated that she got this 10-page document that she wasn't looking for, you know.
So one time I had a customer who wanted me to lead their transformation project. It was in October, and a big research one university in the Midwest. And I was having lunch with the CFO and the provost, and I said, I I know we can be successful. I'm excited about coming to help you. However, in June, I have a long planned vacation to Australia. I was supposed to go last year for my 25th high school reunion because I was an exchange student there. Canceled it because of work. So my wife and I, we have the passports, we have the plane tickets. You know, it's 3 weeks in June. I really need to do that. And they said, well, of course, yeah, no problem. So we get to May, and we're meeting with the president for a monthly meeting. Mr. President, want to remind you, as I did the last 3 months, that next month I'll be out on vacation. And his hands start shaking. And it's like I'm doing this slow-mo canceling my vacation. Whoa!
Yeah.
And and the CFO says, and the provost said, hold on, Brad, stop. Mr. President, when Brad joined us in October, he told us about this this vacation is important for his family and him, and we should uphold our commitment. So I went. Diane was in charge. She did a great job. I didn't check email, didn't check voicemail.
Good for you.
Fast forward 10 years. I'm I'm back in that Midwestern city having lunch with the CFO and his spouse and my wife. And we talked about that situation. He goes, Brad, when you were gone, we were scared to death. But the fact that they upheld their commitment, because I set and managed the expectations, I
Right.
thought that was really special.
So where do technical leaders often struggle the most when they want to become influential?
I think getting out there, not hiding behind your screen. And you can do this virtually. You know, I had a team at Accenture for a couple of years that they were all over North America. So we didn't have an office anywhere. We all worked out of home, and then we would meet at project sites, whether it's Whirlpool in Benton Harbor or Bell South in Atlanta, and but every week, like clockwork, we would the leaders would get on the phone and we'd talk about projects that are coming up, staffing, who can stretch roles. And then twice a year, we get together in person so we actually could see each other, the whole team. And then I would visit each project site and I'd go meet with the customer. I'd go meet with all my staff, all levels, and take them to dinner. And we called it our Winnebago trips. So I would get in the Winnebago and go visit projects all over the country. And when we did the 360 feedback, everyone loved the Winnebago trips because I was there, I was present, I demonstrated that I cared, and was committed to good client service, and they appreciated that. I could have just stayed home behind my screen.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's actually great advice though. Um, so what's something your 25-year-old self would never believe about how influence really works?
Well, I was lucky because when I joined the firm, from day one, they taught us that those people you're working with, whether it's your client or your peers, someday might be your customers or you might be their customer. They may be your boss. You never know. And someone I started with after graduate school, um, 28 years later, became the chief information officer of a huge organization. The same year I became the chief information officer of the University of Texas in Austin. And we still talk with each other. And it just was true. And I had clients who I would have repeat business over years and decades because we were successful together. They trusted us, and 80% of our customers are repeat customers. And it's a lot cheaper to sell to an existing customer base than go try to sell to a new client. So, but just uh, treating everyone all the way through your career with that respect, I think is important. And how can you help each other?
Yeah, people first always. What's the worst advice you've ever heard about getting buy-in?
The worst advice?
Yeah.
Hmm. Uh, that you don't really need to get people participating in the decision, that you can just be the imperial hand waver and it'll happen, and that's totally wrong. When I met with the vice provost who is in charge of curriculum, so we have 54,000 students, 4,000 faculty, 21,000 staff, and she wanted to have a new learning management system for all the courses that would allow lectures to be videotaped or recorded, and then classroom time to have more for discussion. However, the old legacy system, learning management system, was built in the early 90s, very kludgy. The students hated it. They said it was clunky. The faculty didn't like it. So the vice provost and I, our organizations worked together with faculty and staff to go through a procurement process, evaluate 15 different products, and we picked a modern cloud-based, using industry standard solution. And it took us 2 years, but working together, we were able to move that university to the new world. Now, my legacy vendor didn't care about us and took its advantage of us, just came for his check once a year. That was always 10% more than the year before. And um, he, I was so glad to fire them 2 years later, and they never saw it coming. They were that clueless. So that's someone who doesn't give a damn.
Weird.
The new vendor, the vice president for sales, would call me every month just to make sure everything was on track. And his team was standing ready to help us because he knew if he could get us to be successful, all the other large Research One universities would follow. And this was 10 years ago. Guess what? All the other Research One universities followed. And I still talk to the VP, Senior Vice President for Sales. He cared.
And it makes a difference. It always makes a difference.
Yeah.
So what's a leadership trend right now that makes your skin crawl? You just can't stand it.
Um, I think you know, feeling that you can't have remote work. I think the whole move to hybrid was a plus for everybody. To drag people back to the office, I think is a really horrible idea, especially if their work doesn't have to be done in the office.
Yeah, I actually my last guest, that's what his company does is he helps businesses create like a hybrid workplace.
Mm,
He says like one of the things they do is they survey the employees and they ask them like what would your ideal workstation be like, and most of them sort of describe their home workstation. And
yeah.
he said I had to have a conversation with the leaders in the company because really in a hybrid situation you want people doing one kind of work at home and a different kind of work in the office, and
Mm,
generally speaking the reason to even come in the office is collaboration with your team, right? Face to face, collaborate
mm,
real time, quickly. And so they would design the office space to like group the teams in one team in one
sure.
area, kind of make it more. I actually am. I hate these, but it's an open office space. I can't stand them because they're always too noisy. I could tell you talk about stories in my database. There's been
Mm,
many about that. And he said that the data just shows that work from office all the time, not the greatest. Work from home all the time, not the greatest. But some form of hybrid
yeah.
is works really well. But he also said that the key is um defining what hybrid means. Because he said if you
Hmm.
ask employees, they'll say, "Oh, it means I work from home, but then I come in the office every once in a while, like maybe once every
Hmm.
3 months." And you ask the CEO, and he's like, "Work in the office all the time and work at home once in a while." So
Yeah.
you have to
Well,
define what it
so
means.
I had a boss, a chief financial officer, who did not like remote work. And I'm in IT at Accenture. I didn't have an office. I was
Yeah.
a partner for 10 years. I didn't have an office. I was either home or at a client. And he just, you know what? He just didn't trust his employees. He didn't trust us.
Trust is the key. Yeah.
And it's like, well, dude, that's where I think COVID kind of forced that to happen. But I don't like the backtracking.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think actually like one of the things we talked about in that episode was what are we gonna when we look back in a decade from now, are
Hmm.
we gonna see that we killed the office or do we make it better?
Yeah.
And hopefully we can see that we made it better. Because I mean, I
Hmm.
honestly do think that there's a reason to come to the office some of the time, but I'm with you.
Sure.
Like, it's not a mandatory thing in order to function. And a lot of businesses, I coach tech executives, and a lot of their companies have sold off buildings because they just don't need the space anymore.
Right.
People don't come into the office all the time. I don't know. I think it's going to be an interesting thing to look back on in the future.
Yeah. Accenture's been doing hoteling for many, many years,
Yeah.
and it
So
works out
many,
fine.
so many tech sales companies, it's exactly like that. You're either at your home setting up the appointments and your travel, and then you're traveling. So why have like this expensive off? And I mean,
Right.
I think people don't realize like at a say $5 a square foot, and you got
Hmm.
this teeny tiny office of 100 square feet. That's $500 a month
Yeah.
that you're paying for that space. And if no one's ever going to be in there, or if they're going to be in there once a month or once every 2 months, what's the point?
Yeah.
Save the money,
Exactly.
I used to work for a company that was long before the pandemic that was very forward thinking, and they had
Hmm.
about 7 offices that were basically rotating offices. So when it was your day to be in the office, you could use one of those offices. And
Hmm.
otherwise, when you weren't there, someone else used the office. And I
Sure.
mean, the only thing it takes away, of course, is personalizing your office, but who cares if you're not there?
Yeah.
I don't need pictures of my children up someplace where I'm never there. Doesn't
No,
matter.
I agree. I agree.
So after 4 decades of leadership, transformation, and strategy, you've clearly mastered leading with influence. Okay, but here's the big question. What do you think happens to an organization when no one learns how to lead without authority? What's the real cost there?
Well, it's really a disservice to the organization. You're losing productivity. You're losing the ability to uh, have the synergy between teams. Again, my peers at the university, vice president for facilities, well, we have 16 million square feet. It all has IT. I need to work together with them. We built a $32 million data center together. Um, Same thing with the uh, vice provost for curriculum and the public safety. But if you're not collaborating, you're just doing a disservice to the organization. Now, some of my peers didn't play well, and I had a situation where I a peer and I reported to the same boss, and after them not wanting to do something that would have saved the university 100 grand a year by just changing their behavior, I went to the boss and said, I need some help here. And in that case, the boss wouldn't go for it. And so the peer just did something very inefficient for a number of years. It was very frustrating.
Well, why don't you let the listeners know where they can connect with you if they want to find out more?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, and my website is www.bradenglert.com. And I'm going to send you a customized link that you can put in the show notes that I'll send your listeners to a free sample of the book, how to buy the book, and a tab on how to schedule time on my calendar.
Awesome, awesome. Well, we appreciate that. So, guys, this was Brad Englert. He's a technologist, advisor, and author, and a living reminder that real leadership doesn't always come with a fancy title. So thanks for being here today, Brad.
Thank you.
Now, if you got value out of this, remember, leadership isn't about waiting for permission. It's about showing up with purpose, with trust, and with influence. Inside Executive Tech Alliance, our free community for tech leaders, we dive deeper into topics just like this